thank you for joining us on your Saturday, taking time out to join us for the the Orlando developer group. We're co-hosting with Alma with the Orlando admin group. So today we've got Mark Summers, and he's going to give us an introduction to microservice architecture. So if we don't have any questions on that, I will go ahead and turn it over to him. And then after it's over, then myself and Alma, and I hope that Chathra will be here as well, and we can go through and kind of give a little background on ourselves as well. So anyway, that being said, go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Arma. Thanks for having me. And thank you, everybody on the internet who's listening into this now or in the future. But yeah, today we're going to talk about microservices. And I'm going to be very important. This is an intro to microservices. So if you're expecting me to drop some code samples or something really complicated, please refer back to the word intro. But before we get into that, before we introduce microservices, we should probably introduce who I am. And well, this is my embarrassing slide. I'm someone with entirely too much time on my hands to take exams, get certifications, and all that. But if you want to learn more about that, there is a session with the Tampa Bay Marketers Group about taking tests next week, which I'll drop somewhere in the chat somewhere after this. But yeah, and also currently a free agent, so if you like what you see, don't be afraid to slide into my DMs. Now, of course, if you haven't seen any presentations with me, you know what's coming next, which is I got to make fun of this slide a little bit. I can't find any slide more embarrassing than just that intro slide. But let's move on to what's a microservice. Now, generally speaking, microservice is just an architectural pattern where we offload standardized sets of logic into loosely coupled protocols. So just the best way to think of it is I always need to unlock my car. The button, like my key, always is the thing that unlocks my car. No matter what I'm doing, where I'm doing, if I need to unlock my car, I press the button on the remote. The remote handles all the processes of sending the signal to my car, doing the authentication. All that's handled just by the remote itself. So think of the remote as a physical microservice. And like, for example, like more specific microservices, you might see something like famously Twitter had a blow up recently when Elon Musk turned off a bunch of microservices, and part of those microservices were the process that let Twitter send two-factor authentication codes. So just by just inferring from the architecture, we know like Twitter was using a microservice to, when anytime somebody needed to do an authentication, just call the service that handled the two-factor authentication process and then send it back to the main process so it can move on. But a more common one you'll see probably is in service life is return authorizations. Of just once something is ready to do a return, you press the button, that sends the information off to the inventory management system, processes everything to do the return, and then outputs the return label and starts updating the inventory process to track that return. Another place you might see it is also just complicated business logic that is used a lot of places in the business, but doesn't need to be hard-coded into anything that needs it. So when you think of like territory management, your lead routing rules don't have to understand your territory management. They just know, check your territories, and whatever this territory is the correct one, that's the one that wins. And the one I'm going to talk a little bit more in our use case example is fundamentally just a data bucket and designing your protocols to know what to look for in a unified space. So you can get, if we're going to use some developer words here, some canonized data. So data in a unified format that can be accessible, that is known, so that when something needs to be added to it, instead of updating the processes directly, they just all go to a central repository and multiple lines of business can use it, which we'll talk about more. Now, since we also talked about that, I do have to talk about what an architectural pattern is, since we are talking about those, which is just the language we use to solve problems. Everybody does things in specific ways, and there's a lot of methods. So like we spend a lot of time reading up on Salesforce, you might see the model viewer controller pattern, which is just the way the entirety of Salesforce is built out, where you got your model knowing how your data is organized, the systems that tell you how to view that data, and then what that data does. Same thing also with like event-driven architecture, which also can be used in which you'll also see patterns overlap. Like where anytime you're doing something with event-driven architecture, you're probably also going to be using those events to trigger a microservice somewhere along the way. So don't think of these as patterns as like the one way to do it. Is just think of methods that things get done and ways to talk about how they get done. So let's jump in, because I'm one of the people who learns by doing. So we're just going to walk through a situation where someone doesn't have a microservice, and then we're going to walk through one that they could build that solves a lot of their problems. And we're going to start off our problem with our good old sales manager. Who's out there, they're crushing beers on the golf course because that's what they're doing. And they're like, I can close this deal. Give me a promo code, guys. Let me so I can get this deal cut through. I already promised these guys a 50% discount, whatever. And you know what? And they're a sales manager. Their job isn't really to do anything technical or know how anything technical works. Their job is to close those deals. Now here's the problem. Sales guy, not that hard, just add me a promo code. Now over here on sales land, we got to make sure that lead coming from our sales manager gets routed to the right person. It's got to have the right lead source, which means we got to update that pick list. We got to update our lead routing, make sure it goes to the right person. We got to make sure that promo code actually does something. So we got to make sure that whatever discount that he promised them is linked to that promo code in a way that can update the opportunity. We have to create that opportunity once we get it assigned. So there's a lot of little pieces that got to go there that are specific to that one promo code. Now, on the web form where someone actually puts in that promo code, they need to make sure that form can actually collect that promo code. And then when it does get that promo code, know that it's a valid promo code, and then actually do something with it in the system if it needs to do something. And of course, over on the marketing side, someone signs up for the web form, we need this, and with a promo code, we got to send them some information about that promo they signed up for. So the web team needs to know what the promo code does, what it's supposed to do, and they also need to send them a specific email related to what they signed up for. So we can see there's a lot of things going on, and all these teams, they're all working together. Just by adding that one promo code, these three teams all have to solve fundamentally the same problem in three different ways. Now, I'm going to pull over to my good old friend Billy Mays to ask me, it's got to be a better way, right? Now we're going to talk about some microservices. So this is a very, very dumbed down architecture, but what we're going to do is by the end of this walkthrough process where instead of having each of these teams have to create an individual point-to-point solution every time a new promo code gets built out, just have a system where they can go get the information they need and then run the standard business logic they do for anything that comes in with a promo code. And this is based off of something I actually built out in real time that ended up saving about 90 hours a month in labor hours between myself and marketing teams processing. So this same thing, like a little bit of setup in the front end can get you a lot of benefits in the back end just by building some unified processes. Got to press the button. And this is pretty much going to be that core philosophy here. What we're not going to do is build out these point-to-point solutions inside our own little silos to solve a problem. We're going to make a unified system, so anytime something needs to do something related to a promo code, we know where to go to get that information, then we can do what we do every time. Now, those of you in developer land will probably be looking at this and going, this isn't really a microservice so much as it's a request-reply pattern, and you're right. But microservices eventually evolve a request-reply somewhere. As mentioned earlier about patterns, how they stack on top of each other. You're going to run into this, and as I mentioned this is an intro, so please don't at me. But yeah, the core idea here is we're going to be running the business logic is going to be running on the platform side. So sales platform, marketing platform, web platform, they're going to run their own business logic. And at the end of this, the microservice is just the repository where they get everything to run that logic. So the best way to do that, simplest, cheapest way, is going to spin up a custom object because we know what those are. We know that everything that's connected to our system can access it. We already have, for like the case of sales, we don't even need an API connection. Marketing Cloud's got all our marketing platforms got APIs. Our website's got API calls, so they can call these objects, go get them. And promo codes are really good because promo codes are a unique standard or a unique key just by nature. So it's a perfect use case where we just have something where we can look at, we have a value, we know we can find exactly one record and get anything we need related to it. Now, you notice here I put in, there's a bunch of little fields for various lines of business, the things that can happen. So we need to, like promo code has to add someone to a campaign, we can tag a campaign to a promo code. We can tag a partner account so we know which promo codes belong to which partners. We can have expiration dates so we know if a promo is valid or not. And these are things. And some of these I'll talk a little bit more as I walk through, but just example, your sky's the limit here because the best way to think of it is just as the promo code object is going to be where every one of your teams is going to find the information they need to do the jobs they need to do. And that's really in this slide, again, just emphasizing what it just says, is we're going to look, we know where to find everything we need to do, and this is how we're going to go get it done. So like, for example, on the sales side, I know I'm kind of glossing over a lot of this. Like we can just set a lead source. Now, fun thing about the lead source standard field, even though it's a pick list, it's an unrestricted pick list. And because it's a standard field, we can't actually change that, which means that actually gives us a little benefit here. So when we're making a promo code, we can put any text value in there, and that automatically will populate into the lead source pick list as a value. So it comes out in reporting. There's not going to be an error from you do that. Another fun pick list hack you can do here is also set the routing with just a standard pick list. This takes a little bit more setup on the front end just to allow some available options, but this is an admin-friendly way to make a visually assigning routing pretty simple to the end user, because this you can change the API value of a pick list value to be something other than the label. For example, like this, you can set it to the ID of a queue or a user. So that way on the promo code object, you can just have a drop down of available places to route it. The label says plain text what it is, the API value, which is what your code's going to see when you do a get on it or you do an API call to it, is going to see that ID. So that way you can just directly pass that ID into, again, another flow, anything that's going to do your routing automation. You have all that right there. So it's a handy hack to keep in mind. It is also something, if you're running reports on something with a pick list and the values you're getting in your report don't really make sense compared to what's in the pick list, check your pick list values. This is just a general useful thing, because they could be a time where the label and the value get distinct. By default, the value is the label, and you actually manually go in to edit the label, but just the thing to keep an eye on for. And again, further use cases, we can toggle whether or not that promo code automatically creates an opportunity. And if it does, what values we need to push into it, because we have all those values right there in that promo code. And another fun thing I built into this, which I'm not really going to talk too much about here, but you can also track how many times your promo codes were used by just making a master detail relationship to another object tracking redeemed promos. So you can tag those and then tag those to opportunities as well, so you can see which opportunities specifically use them, how many times a promo code was used. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, you can track these promo codes back to their partners. So between the redeemed promos and the partners, you can see who's bringing in the revenue, how much revenue we're bringing in, and also how much it's costing us in just those terms of whatever discount that promo is giving. Now, over on the marketing side, we can set those up, these promo codes, as a sync data extension, or we can do some more complicated things with these if you're going to do Pardot or something else, where the promo can just exist at this is a data extension. So then anytime a new contact comes in that needs to hit the welcome email, we can use Marketing Cloud specific AMP script to just populate some values from that promo code object to create the welcome email. So we don't have to make a brand new welcome email for every new promo. We just have something that can be automated out. So our marketing team, again, doesn't panic and have to make a new email or a new welcome drip, which just all their welcome drips will be compatible with any promo code we give them, because they know where to find the information to get the information that matters. And same thing with our web team. The shopping carts, the shopping platform app you're going to use, the lead form, they can just make an API call back into Salesforce, check that promo code, see if it's a valid promo code, see if it's an expired promo code. And if the website needs to do something like send that data off to another external system, it has all the information it needs to do that just right there in the logic. Now, realizing I kind of talked a little bit fast through this, but of course I got to say Billy Mays is back, because there is more. And with this design, pick off the logic off to their own silos, so the business project's there, and just separate out by using standardized logic. That sales manager out there crushing beers in the golf carts trying to close some business, if there's someone who's authorized to create promo codes, they can do it right there in the Salesforce mobile app or anything, because it's just a custom object record. We know how to control object access to that. Our users know how to use it, which also means it's easy for them to check whether or not promo is active. And again, someone who needs to make a one-off promo, they can spin those off without having to call anybody. So the process that would have been we were talking about earlier, where those 3 teams having to all do something very specific to meet this one sales manager's request, which is probably coming in on a Saturday afternoon. Probably so instead of ruining everybody's weekend, the sales manager just spends 2 minutes filling in the information, which we can control with tick lists and required values to make sure the business logic is going to work, because we know what the values need and what they're expecting, and can then control it on the UI layer. So that whole process that would have taken, again, those 3 teams a bunch of time, at least a couple hours each, done in 5 minutes, no code changes required. And that's really the TLDR about why you want to use microservices. Instead of making these point-to-point solutions that are going to stack on top of each other and eventually become unscaled, you're going to focus on building something that various parts of your business can use in the same or similar ways, and then reuse throughout your time there. So we know, like as admins specifically, we fall into this trap of, oh, I know how to solve this. I just make a workflow. I'll just make a flow to do this one specific thing that's hard coded to one value. Yeah, it's fast. We can do it, but you shouldn't. It's worth it to invest the time to build something out there to find a way to solve the problem more than once. That's really the core point. The core feature of microservices is we're trying to find a way to answer a question, a similar question in a similar way more than once. That's really the core of it. And more importantly, that's the end of my presentation.
So, ready for questions?
Yeah. I know I did talk too fast because I got way too into the infomercial jokes, but let's see what happens.
So because the couple of integrations with marketing and any other system is already looking for any new records in that object, you're saying you've got a new object that's holding the variables that are needed, maybe even as the API value for pick list. And because whether it's the Marketing Cloud or Eloqua or something is already going to create a new campaign based off of this record with X values, that they could potentially just, like, that campaign could be spun up automatically without a human being involved over the weekend.
Kind of, because the way, the real way I solved this, which was I just formatted our welcome campaign to whenever a new person comes in with a promo code, it would just look at the values that were mapped to our promo code object, which were automatically passed through in a way. So instead of having a specific email that had a hard-coded, hey, thanks for using partner X, it just grabbed partner X because we knew where partner X was going to be. So we formatted the email, and same thing when it came to the offers. We formatted the email and set up in such a way of where we had the blocks where instead of saying whatever the specific promo was, we just had a block that said just get variable, do Y. And then there's another variable that needed to fill out that promo. So we knew how the promos were going to be structured every time. So just by unifying the language that we were using, we can make a blank template that appears highly customized, because it is highly customized, because all your personalization data lives in a place where Marketing Cloud can just go get it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's because you think about it, the same steps happen every time, and that's the perfect example of where something can be microserviced out, is where even though the specifics are different, the same steps have to happen every time.
Right. It doesn't sound that different to me, really, from the practice of extracting variables out of flows into custom metadata, or a lot of times we also use front-end objects because it can empower the business to, add a new record in the same way that you just did. So basically all of your variables are always extracted to either an object or a custom metadata object.
Exactly. And that's also the reason why I use, my example, a custom object rather than custom metadata, is because training a sales manager on how they go into setup and do something, kind of a hard ask, because they already hate using Salesforce as much as it is to begin with. If you make it something they already know how to use, it's a lot easier to offload the parts of things to the people who are authorized to do it. So instead of them having to put it all into an email and send it off, they even see the value of, oh, I can just do this.
Yeah, we started building a lot of things that way. Our fundamental questions were, is this something we're going to want a business ops person to be able to manipulate and control, or do we want to manipulate and control it? And that's either an object or so either front end or back end.
Yeah. And there's also a combination of those things you can even do as well, for the parts of it that should be controlled by the business, as well as the parts that should be controlled in metadata. You can always hybrid these out, because that's one of the when we start thinking about microservices, that you start breaking things off into contained units that are always going to be the same. Mm-hmm. So, for example, like you can hybrid out, like, well, we know these values are going to have to be specific, that need to be dynamically controlled by sales ops. We can have all those exist in an object, and the parts of it that are more specific or system logic, those can store into a custom metadata table to give us more flexibility in the design of your architecture. Because again, microservice design is a lot of not so much specific things you do, it's ways you think about how you do them.
Yeah. Could you almost make an argument that like a subflow is a type of microservice?
Yeah. Same thing. Also, if you want to get even like fancier, it's for the dev world. When the way you build the structure of how you build an Apex trigger, where you don't run your business logic inside the trigger, you have that the Apex trigger, call it an Apex class. Those subclasses that you're calling out there, those are really like microservice in the context of that Apex trigger. Especially if you can also, because those classes can also be called elsewhere too. So a class can call another class.
A utility, right? A utility is a microservice then.
Yeah, the best way to think of it, because we're calling it a pattern is really the best way to call it, because it is a way of thinking about how to get things done.
Yeah.
And especially if you go to things like, if you're in commerce, the concept of headless commerce, pretty much the entirety of it is microservices all the way down.
Okay. Not in there. I don't know.
Yeah, so just one of those things, like these are things you're going to see a lot, but like a lot of times you get, as I made that joke about a request and reply, a lot of microservices are also just a unified way to ask for information and a unified way to get that information back.
So I'm dominating the questions. I have more, but I want to give other people a chance to ask.
No worries, I tend to ramble anyways in my answers, so but yes, the microphones are open. Anyone wants to jump in, although it is recorded, so I understand why anyone doesn't want to hear their voice. I am reading the chat as well, so in case anyone wants to throw in something there who doesn't want to use a microphone.
So, Mark, I'm going to jump in for just a second. So, with the example that you showed with your sales rep out on the golf course, must be a hell of a job, right? But and you're going through all the stuff that happens from Salesforce back to the the external system and back into the marketing cloud and so on and so forth. Now, I'm assuming that a lot of this stuff is basically, and as a developer, I think of microservices, maybe a little differently, but the way you've painted it is exactly right. But to me, the microservices would be more of an endpoint that could be called from the different systems. Is that also true? Is that how would you how would those then tend to be built out and then being used?
Yeah, exactly. Kind of the same way, because you think about it, but even though it was calling internally within Salesforce, that promo code object doesn't even that could have existed in a legacy system, but because promo code is that unique key, that is something we now know. All the business logic just knows. Call this standard service using this. We just put in this unique key to call the service that already has, again, make it more microservice-y, like an API call out, again, using a unique key to find a specific record. It was HTTP GET, and the and again, their standard return of what we need to get back. And of course, that also send, or for example, been like the shopping carts is more of a send some value, and it doesn't need to reply. It doesn't need to reply, but it does need to do something. The promo codes can be set up on the other side just to have that information that it needs to do that next task.
Thank you.
I have another question that I think pivots off of that. So we had a scenario some years back where we were standing up the omnichannel chat and the embedded services web form onto the website. Our MarTech group had built a pretty heavy application where it learned a lot about the prospects and had them kind of embedded into this application that then the embedded service for chat could not take. It couldn't say, oh, I've just learned these 4 attributes about the prospect, and I'm going to put them into the chat so that I can then put them into the lead record. And because that communication couldn't happen, I kept wondering, what if you had a microservice that was like, I don't know, sitting in AWS or whatever, And maybe, I guess you would have had to, if the embedded chat could not call that, you would have just called it once the record was in Salesforce and you needed to go get that extra information. But it felt like there was there's information that everybody needs, but these systems aren't talking to each other. So is there a different way to go get that information?
That's kind of like, that's kind of exactly the core of like this example I walked through. It's just we have information that other teams need, and the all linked to a specific value of like a common key. It's like, like my example promo code, but also prospect ID, like these subscriber keys. These are all good first party foreign IDs that we know we can find something with. That's always a good repository. So I always like to work when I start architecting something. I always start to work from, if there's a system limitation of, like, for example, your chatbot couldn't communicate back into the lead source, into your CMS directly. Start from what can communicate. So then we just put then work backwards. So for example, when I originally built this out, I was using Pardot instead of Marketing Cloud. So to get the promo code information into Pardot, since I couldn't directly call the object through the way Pardot's designed, I ended up having the promo code stamped into the lead itself into places, so I could use that information as needed from the same leads. Then that same lead automation just had the lead piggyback off itself. The examples of start with something that works, and then find a way to get something that works to get closer and closer to what you want.
Yeah.
Looking at the clock, I realized I really did lean into that infomercial rapid talking. So I do apologize for burning through this time. But again, it is the weekend. It's 1,005 degrees in LA. It's probably not much better in Tampa.
That's like 60 in Seattle.
Living the dream.
We don't like too much heat here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, this was awesome. Thank you. I really appreciated it.